He did say something kind about Mr. Cabrera, so we wanted to strike it from the record. But if you struck everything that wasn't kind about Mr. Cabrera, you wouldn't say anything.
You didn't have no record left.
Yeah, there you go.
Mr. Moore, I don't know if you know my dad, Bill Pitchford.
Oh, sure, yeah, he's a great guy.
Told me to say hi.
Oh, good. I didn't know you're part of the group. That's great. Yeah, I know your mom's a teacher and everything, or works for the school.
Yeah,
Right?
she was good.
Your dad and I worked together for way too long. Yeah.
Start by-
20 years.
If you want, but start by introducing yourselves first, and then he knows most of you, or at least he's dealt with most of you. And the only one that I know for sure that I thought would be coming would be Stefan. Was he in class today? Stefan?
That's the one? Yeah, so I want to. Do you want me to test it?
Oh, yeah.
Again, if you want to tell him he was on.
Yeah, that's right. Come on, yeah, see. We just want to like cover the top.
I want to get away the cameras.
You guys
Yeah.
want to, you've already introduced yourself, so we'll run this way.
Okay, I'm Sharon. I mentioned before with like the exit polling.
Yep, great.
Hello, my name is Daniel Edson.
Hi, I'm Hassan Brücke, Villarreal.
Is Bella now?
And you're all at Coronado?
Yes. Okay, so we can probably start with like the big question that you know.
Yeah. So yesterday we had a very fortunate like realization that originally we had the Republican primary debate scheduled for the 7th and the Democratic scheduled for the 13th. But then we ran into the problem then the Democratic candidates know the question.
They're gonna like have prior access, most likely to like what moderators ask.
And so we don't have any problem with moving the Republican debate, but the Democratic one has to stay that day because they're scheduled to vote. So we were wondering whether it would be wise to just push them into the same night so that we could keep them completely isolated, or just push the Republican debate.
After the 13th.
Yeah.
I would suggest that you push the Republican debate after the 13th. I think just because you've got so many candidates in the Democratic primary, that first of all, I don't think, because I'm sure you want to kind of group the Republicans together, one way or the other, and I don't think it would be fair to them. And realistically, because you're talking about primary elections, you are talking about two different audiences, because there's nobody who can vote in both of those primaries. So, and I agree with your concern about the risk of Democratic candidates hearing the questions in advance. I think there's less damage that can be done if the Republicans have fewer candidates and all that. So the fairness issue doesn't raise its own head. If you can, do you think you can get the Republicans done before it started really voting them? You have other date slots? Or?
What is the date of the start of the
20th.
20th?
February 20th.
Yeah, I think we.
It'd probably have to be, we have to do 2 debates that week.
Yeah.
Right.
It'd have to be like the 13th and maybe like the 15th or something like that.
What?
I think that would be fine. And again, I would not worry that one is going to produce a smaller crowd than the other, because as you guys know, that's sort of the nature of politics here in Pennsylvania. Where, the Democratic primary is just going to draw a lot more voters.
Could you just, this was, because this frustrated us a little bit last night, because we realized the dilemma that we put ourselves in. Is it possible to have them all on the same night and just intermingle them? Because it's all going to be Socratic. They're never all going to be on the stage at one time.
So again, the point I would come back to is really you're serving two different audiences. Because of the nature of primary elections. So for the convenience of the bulk of the audience that you're going to draw, which is going to be Democratic primary voters, I think having them on 2 separate nights is good. And it's also fair to the Republican candidates, because I do think, what's going to happen is you're going to have a Republican candidate come up on stage, and you're going to have this mass exodus of people going out to get a drink or whatever. That could potentially be rude, or the other thing, because of partisan differences, you're more likely to get booing and that kind of thing. So I would act as if you're serving 2 different audiences.
All right, so then we're going to start.
Oh, we had 2 new people come in?
Okay.
Yes, so.
Ileana, Flynn, I apologize for being late.
Nope, we just started.
Just in case. I'm
Yeah,
Bob, for those of you who are
Yes.
all right.
Okay, so essentially we just called you here today because we wanted to get your expertise on different areas of El Paso that would be important to cover with questions and Socratic dialogue. So far, we have met with the former VP member and also with Mr. Dig, and we have essentially outlined 4 different topics to discuss. The first being Fort Bliss. And initially, we also grouped together Fort Bliss with the VA. So that will be the first topic, and then also immigration, economy with a focus on NAFTA, and then lastly, healthcare. So if we can just start with Fort Bliss and the VA.
So I would broaden that to national defense, probably, rather than, because if you start talking about Fort Bliss, you tend to really talk about it in economic development terms and what it means for El Paso, which is obviously important, but I think if you broaden your topic to national defense, then that really does open to talk about Fort Bliss specific things, about the U.S. role in the world and how the congressional candidates see that, and then also about the affairs. So I think if you just have a national defense or national security topic, that gives you a broader amount.
And then just within like Fort Bliss itself, like the economic issues that you mentioned, is there anything that stands out to you that you should be covering?
I think, you know, the future of the post in an era of changing national defense needs. Part of the whole government budget debate going on right now is actually about increasing the defense budget. So from Fort Bliss's standpoint, that could mean a couple of things. One, would be sort of maintaining the level of mission that we have now, but it also could mean growing the mission of Fort Bliss as the Army grows in size. And so we could talk to the candidates about how they would use the office to protect Fort Bliss's mission, or build Fort Bliss's mission.
So then in terms of like just expanding Fort Bliss, you think that would be like a viable question for candidates? Like,
It could be. And here's an interesting, especially with Democrats, an interesting quandary that you can catch them in. You know, historically, Democrats have been more in favor of increasing domestic spending versus increasing defense spending. They want to control defense spending. And in a place like El Paso, where you have a large military mission, that creates an awkwardness for a lot of Democrats because, you know, on the one hand, they may want to say, you know, we need to be very careful about our role in the world and the funding for the military, but at the same time, we want to get a bunch of money for Fort Bliss. You know, so I think with Democrats in particular, that could be an interesting conversation. So you get, and that's why I suggested you broaden the national defense, because you can. I think one of the things you want to get from candidates is, you know, what's their view of the United States' role in the world. That can be a diplomatic mission, but I think primarily we're talking about militarily. You know, we're still at the back end of these 2 really long wars that have drained blood and treasure. So what's the role of the United States in the world today? And then you can bring it into Fort Bliss and say, what's Fort Bliss's role in that broader mission, and how do you, as a freshman member of Congress, protect that? The answer is they can't. I mean, you know, they don't have a voice with that. It would be interesting to hear what alliances they might make to try to help protect the
national.
Right.
We did get a little bit of insight from the former WE member as far as some of the policies that are currently, I guess, significant.
Was this Austin?
Yes. So he said, he talked about appropriation, specifically the National Defense Authorization Act. And he suggested maybe we ask something, or just be really familiar with it and see what kind of pork barreling was going on with it, and ask about if you don't support such and such provision within this bill, would you be willing to vote something that everyone is expected to support. So I don't know if you have.
I think that's a good question. You know, Mr. Bergman and I were talking about this the other day too, and obviously the NDAA is one of those bills that gets what they call Christmas tree, where everybody sort of puts their favorite little things on it, and El Paso benefited this year. You may remember Congressman O'Rourke for the last couple of years has been trying to preserve Caston Range, and he finally got some protections passed, and he couldn't get a standalone bill through, but he got a provision in the NDAA that basically did what he was trying to do with his legislation. So that was an example of using that bill for a specific El Paso purpose. And so you've got, you know, every congressman in the country is trying to do something similar.
The other stuff he said within that was foreign intervention in general. If you have any insight on questions as far as that, or if there's anything we should ask.
I think this gets back to the U.S.'s role in the world and how we see the U.S. If any of you have gone to Beto's town halls in the last couple of years, you know, one of the things that he keeps insisting on is Congress needs to be playing a much more vibrant role in foreign engagements. So, like all of the foreign entanglements, whether they're in Iraq or Afghanistan or even some in Africa, the authorization from that still comes from the post 9/11 bill that declared that we were under attack by Al Qaeda, and so Congress has never revisited any sort of use of force authorization. So I think that's it's a great philosophical question and a great practical question at the same time on, you know, what should Congress's role be when we talk about using U.S. military might internationally.
And then that can kind of get into just like the use of the military or international in general.
Right, and so what's the national interest? You know, should we only become engaged when our national interests are at stake, and then how do you define national interests?
Could that kind of be a transition question from, because our topics are also about immigration.
Yeah, that's right.
So the next topic.
Okay. So what would you think about that? In a way, the transition. Foreign affairs.
And then something else that we also put together originally, just anything that you might have to add about the VA.
And then, you know, the question becomes, and Bento's talked a lot about this since he's been in Congress, that, you know, once you make the commitment to authorize our forces to go to war, you have a moral obligation to take care of them when they come home. And everybody pays lip service to that, but the truth is, if you see the VA system, you know, it's very evident that we've not lived up to the commitments we've made to our veterans. Very antiquated service mechanisms. We're just not taking care of it particularly well. We're not funding it the way it should be. So the challenge, I think, with asking candidates about this is how do you move them beyond lip service? Because everybody is going to say, I love veterans, we should take care of them. So I think, you know, I think if you could probe them for specifics on how we can do that, you know, one of the things that Beto's trying to do here is a pilot program where you begin to use the public and private sector, healthcare sectors to sort of backstop a lot of the areas where the VA has not been able to meet the needs, just because there's so many veterans here. And so they're piloting this program here where, you know, if you have combat-connected injury, you know, loss of limb, traumatic brain injury, that the VA really is the super specialist in, by all means you need to be going to the VA. But if you have other injuries that don't require that high level of specialization, you should be able to go to the private sector, the public sector like UMC, to get that kind of health care. It's more difficult to execute than it sounds. A lot of veterans are really opposed to the idea because they think it's a first step in sort of trying to dismantle the VA. there are questions you can dig at that. But trying to get candidates off of, I love veterans and we should take care of them,
Yeah.
is hard.
Definitely, we're gonna make sure the moderators that we have up there are making sure that the candidates actually have substance in their
They're
state.
answering the question, not just promoting.
Exactly.
So more specificity on like actual plans for the VA, how to.
Right, how would you improve the VA? What specifics of your exam that you think could work? Were there any things unique to El Paso that we should be doing here as a way of leading on this issue?
But there is just general agreement that the VA as of now is like having issues with.
Yeah, I think, and every party out of power, condemns the party in power for not taking care of
Yeah.
veterans, and then once they get in power, they switch roles.
And how are Republicans, because they're gonna basically use the same format for the Republican debate as well as the Democratic debate, they have to be ready for the direction the Republicans are gonna go. How do they drag the information out of them?
I think for VA, certain similar approaches.
Because they're gonna say they want to support the VA too. Everyone's gonna say they want to.
So I think in asking the same sorts of specific questions, what specific changes do you recommend that could help get needed services to our veterans? Is there anything that El Paso could be doing to lead on this issue since we have such a large veteran population? I think that cuts across where you could get into some interesting conversation with the Republicans is sort of the role of the U.S. in the world, that kind of broad question. Because there's a big split in the Republican Party, and I think Trump is evidence of that. You've got, the old line cold warriors that believe that the United States ought to be the predominant military power in the world. And then you have the more traditional isolationists in the Republican Party who don't believe, the Rand Pauls of the world, who don't believe we should be intervening in affairs that don't directly impact on the nation. So I don't know any of the Republican candidates, so I don't know how much depth they're going to have on that issue. But you can get into a very interesting conversation quickly.
If they can hold a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be the hard part.
Right.
Any other questions you guys have on the national? Well, let's, I want to look at the national defense, and I like the idea of having a national defense as a topic, and we can get into Fort Bliss and everything else from that. You mentioned the idea, and I want to make sure everyone understands this, because remember, it's not our objective to catch these people.
Yeah, you're not playing gotcha here.
No.
And you've got to be really careful in how you phrase the question so that it doesn't sound like you're playing a game of gotcha.
Because you're there for the audience, you're not there for yourself. It's not our point as the Socratic moderator to trap them and to get them. It's to get the information out, what the audience needs to do to have an educated vote to select who's on there. So when you get into this idea, what can they do as a freshman congressman? What direction, if they go that route, what direction should they take that? I know from my study of government that a freshman congressman has no power at all. They're low on the poll on the committees. The argument is that you shouldn't have term limits because if you get someone in there, they actually have some influence and they can actually get the job done. As a new congressman, you don't know how the system works, basically. And all of a sudden, everyone's coming to you to do them a favor. You can't go to them and have them. I mean, I think you could get them on the idea. I think you could, if you wanted to, you could get them saying, oh, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to have this great impact when I go to Washington. And I think you can sit there and say, oh, they don't even know what they're talking about, but the audience won't get it. That'll be such a subtle.
So I think one way you can get at this, and this is more broad than just sort of the national defense issue we're talking about, but one of the things you can always ask, because the one area as a freshman you can have some impact, although it's still limited, is in the committee process. So I think it's certainly worth exploring with all the candidates which committees they would like to be assigned to. And just so you know, by and large, they can only serve on 2 committees. Bento right now is on Armed Services and Veterans Affairs. He was on Homeland Security when he was a freshman. He gave up the Homeland Security seat to get the seat on Veterans Affairs. So, but here's the thing. You don't want somebody just to come up and say, well, I'd like to be on appropriations.
Ways and means.
Ways and means.
Good luck.
that ain't happening, right? So I think, you ask them the question, what committee assignments would you press for if you're elected? And secondly, this is the kind of the critical thing, how would you what leverage do you have to get those kind of committee assignments? And it's another way of knowing, or another way of asking, who do you know? So, I could say I want to be on appropriations or whatever, but it's not going to happen. Beto was not able to get on to Veterans Affairs, or on to the Armed Services Committee his freshman term, because there are a bunch of other people like Joaquin Castro who also wanted to be on the committee who were better fundraisers than him. So he got left out. Once he got a little bit more seniority, he was able to get on. So the question is, so you say you want to be on Armed Services, how would you go about getting that committee assignment? Who could you talk to in Washington to help out? And so somebody like Veronica Escobar would be able to say, Steny Hoyer, who's the #2 Democrat in the House, has already backed my candidacy. I have a good relationship with him. We're certainly try to work with him. The other candidates, I don't know what they're going to say. But I think trying to help the audience understand, okay, can these people be as effective as they say they're going to be by asking questions about, so not only what do you want, but how are you going to go about getting it? It's a good question. But that's really, the committee assignments is really almost the only place you have influence. There are occasional exceptions to that. Will Hurd, when he was elected, got appointed, I think, to the Commerce Committee as a freshman, which is very unusual. But the Republicans were very high on him and wanted to put him forward in a very prestigious committee. So it happens sometimes, but by and large, it doesn't happen.
And that's your understanding what goes on in government. But I think the average audience member might not understand that subtly. The other thing I'm worried about in this national defense deal is, and the only one I can remember, I think Russell could probably give you all 6 of the candidates that are running the Democratic camps. I think some of them are going to, and I'm just going to suggest Tillman, and Tillman might have more knowledge because he was a government teacher or a middle school history.
And he's a retired military officer.
And he's a military officer. I'm concerned about the average person that doesn't know anything. So we're allotting 10 minutes for the Socratic method for that.
For all 4 topics?
For all 4 topics, which isn't a lot of time, but
We've allowed for not getting to all 4 of the topics, so we're kind
yeah. But the problem I'm concerned about is the one that won't even go a minute on this topic. He'll give a yes or no answer, or she'll give an yes or no answer, and it stops. Should we put a 4th question in there just for that person? Should we have them describe whose role is it to regulate the military? Is it fall under the executive power of Commander-in-Chief, or does it fall under the congressional power of the ability to declare war and allocate?
I think, if you have candidates who are giving short answers largely because they're ill-informed, asking them further questions to show that they're informed is not serving the audience.
Right.
And I think, so one of the challenges you obviously have here is you've got, 2 candidates, maybe 3, that really stand any chance of winning the Democratic primary. The other 3 don't, but you have to be fair to everybody. But I don't think being fair means you have to give everybody the 10 minutes if you've asked the same set of questions, and 1 or 2 of the candidates are just ill-informed and are unable to, express anything beyond yes or no.
Because they brought Mickey Lowry in for questions. They had 6 questions, and they thought it was going to take 15, 16 minutes. She spent less than a minute on each question. I mean,
It's a good thing she didn't get the job then, right? Oh, what?
we can X that out on the paper.
No, but so, and that's again, appointment versus election.
Yeah.
And it's the danger.
But I see some of these candidates, because I remember we had a young man last year named Jotham, and he had to Socratic Willie Cager.
Yeah.
What a nightmare.
Yeah, and Willie's a sweetheart, and he's had several strokes and everything, and so he's not going to win. So what do? Do you really? So again, I think the thing to remember is you're not there to serve the candidates, you're there to serve the audience.
So once you get the audience to realize that this person might not be the person for the job,
Yeah.
you just let them
You
off the
don't need
hook.
to beat it up. So you're polite, you give them the same opportunity to answer questions, but I don't think you need to feel an obligation to stretch it in 10 minutes.
Because the audience is what we're concerned about.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would really recommend you think about, I think 10 minutes is not enough time for 4 topics. It's barely enough time for 3 topics with any depth. So I'd really encourage you to think about, you know, what are the 3 topics that voters are most interested in.
And we asked yesterday, Mr. Dave, his opinion to prioritize more really asked for the same thing, just to get an idea of getting the important topics out of the way first. So everyone gets.
10 minutes, and for any of you who ever sat in a questioning role or something like that, 10 minutes is not a lot of time. It seems like it when you first start, but it goes in a hurry. And then, you know, having been around Ron Tillman a lot, he's a guy who likes the sound of his own voice, and he winds up filibustering. And especially when you're in a student role, you know, you're trying to be polite and allow the candidate to answer, but you don't want to interrupt. But then at the same time, you don't want to have people blither on. Now, I've seen Austin do this a couple of times, and he had no patience for any of that, and he had no qualms about interrupting. But you still feel bad when you do it.
And Mercedes last year in the mayor election, when she dealt with the guy that was she stopped him from, and he would always make a comment like, "Oh, this young lady wants me to not go off on something else." And I thought that was kind of rude of him to say that. I mean, all she was doing.
Kind of dumb. It makes him look bad.
Yeah. So, all right. I think the next topic, maybe, unless you guys have more questions.
No, that's good.
So the next one's immigration. And as far as kind of the subtopics we have for that, we have DACA and we have like comprehensive reform, and we also it's been suggested that we not ask about the wall, but rather just focus on on DACA and on overall immigration.
Like border security.
Yeah, border security.
Yeah, I think border security, rather than if somebody wants to volunteer the wall as a part of the border security answer, that's fine. It would be interesting to see how the Republicans answer that question too, but I think that sounds fine. So on immigration, remember, there's another whole broad issue of this topic that's kind of hard to get into, which is the whole legal immigration mechanism and what our policies ought to be as a country. And we're just starting to have a conversation right now about this. U.S. policy for decades has really been around family unification as the primary policy underlying immigration. Places like Canada and Australia take a very different approach, and basically it's like they're recruiting for skills. And so that's a potentially good topic area. But I think along the border, when we talk about immigration, we tend to talk more about documented, and about DACA, and about border security, which I think is fine for us because that's the reality we're living in. But there is another immigration component too.
As far as DACA and immigration as a whole, for DACA we've had some suggestion about, sorry, I'm going back and forth between all these things. We've had just conversations about like how the agreement is going to be reached and what's stopping it. And then we also have, as far as immigration reform, whether comprehensive should be the plan, which is what Dave was talking about yesterday, or whether it should be like a piecemeal kind of approach. Do you think there's any questions that would be?
So here's a tricky thing to keep in mind, especially with DACA. So you've got this Friday deadline looming on the government shutdown that DACA's got tied up in. It's entirely possible that the DACA issue will have been resolved by the time we have your debate. I'm personally very skeptical if that's going to happen, but it is possible. that they may have normalized the status of DACA recipients by then. So they keep working on questions on that. And I think, on the question of piecemeal versus comprehensive, it's a great topic, but everybody's going to say comprehensive is the way to go. The reality is, if it was that easy, it would have been done years ago. And so I think part of the thing you can probe them on is, as a representative of the border, what voice can you bring to the national debate, and how can you make the border's voice heard on this, and try to get them off of, we need our immigration system's broken benefits. Yeah, everybody's been saying that for 12 years, and because of the political realities of the country, we can't get it done. So how do we move beyond that?
Now let that be pretty broad now, so that might open it up for suggestions on just general things that can be done to improve border security and just immigration reform in general.
So generally, what needs to be included?
I think, I think probably ask them to prioritize is probably the best way. And that gets away from we should address it all rather than bits and pieces. So ask them, what are the 3 biggest priorities in immigration reform for you? And let them take that off. That might be the way to approach that. I suggest 3 just as a
For those that are doing the Socratic, are they going to get into the conversation that we hear in Washington right now that about the merit versus, and I haven't heard it phrased this way, but it kind of's been phrased this way, the merit by skill, they're going to give something to us versus kind of the wretched refuge approach that we've had in the past?
That's the family reunification thing that's been our dominant policy. I think it's a great conversation to have. I don't think most of the candidates have engaged in that conversation yet, so that might be a good one to get into.
We're assuming that at least 2 or 3 of these candidates are going to be somewhat coached, correct? Can we assume that they're going to be somewhat coached?
I don't know about coach.
Or have some knowledge of?
I think there'll be a wide range of knowledge. I think there are a couple of candidates, Norma and Veronica, have been dealing with the immigration issue for a long time and know it really well. The others are a little bit newer to it.
And you said they probably haven't discussed what or had what conversation?
The merit, the immigration policy of merit versus family unification.
Okay, so if they go, because they want the candidate not just to be able to spew, they want to see what they really mean. So let's say one of the candidates get up and say, I think they should be skilled, is a question that comes out of the Socratic moderator say, what do you mean by skilled?
How do you determine the skills?
How do you determine it, and what skills are we looking for, correct?
Yeah. And I think the other thing that you could say for somebody who does push the merit idea, and I'm not so sure that any of the Democrats will do that. Some may fall in the trap. But you can ask them, well, right now, the policy is leaned toward family unification as a primary driver. So are you willing to tell people who are already in this country that they can't bring their family over because we want to look for people who have different skill sets? So that's kind of a way to make them a little bit more uncomfortable and deal with the reality of what goes on.
So no candidate's going to be a true, would you think any candidate's going to be a pure wretched refuge person saying, hey, we got to provide the American dream for
I think some might, and especially when you talk about it. So another branch of immigration policy is refugees, asylum seekers, and things like that, which is kind of a different category too, from just somebody who's applying, I want to move to the United States because my family lives there, or I want an H-1B visa so I can come and get a great tech job in the United States that I can't get in India. So there's a multitude of immigration is far more complex than the national conversation has suggested. And I think because it's so complex, it's one of the reasons it's very difficult to reach a consensus on this.
So we can assume that these candidates are going to come up there, if they're really qualified for the job, they're going to come up with some idea of a policy. They might not even know how they reach that policy.
Right.
We gotta dig in and find out how they established it, okay? So if they say something, all we need to do is say, can you provide more clarity? What does this mean if you're saying, okay, we want people that are skilled? Because the Republicans might come out and say, we want people.
You know, and I think it's just, and an even more general question that could cause them some heartburn is I'd go back and pull the data on how many people have immigrated legally to the United States on average over the last couple of years. I'd say it's 500,000 per year, or I don't know if that's the number. But you could say, you know, in recent years, the United States has brought in an average of 500,000 legal immigrants through the visa process and refugee process. Should we be bringing in more? Should we be bringing in fewer? How should we determine who gets in and who doesn't? Those are really sort of, those kind of questions get at the candidate's values, which I think are really helpful, assuming the candidate is knowledgeable.
And how would you ask, how would they ask the question, or how would they lead to get the extent if they went? The skill, you can ask them, okay, I mean, that's easy, okay, how do you measure that skill? How do you know the outcome of what you want to achieve? But if you're looking at the other direction, how do you get them to say, because I don't think anyone in the United States, maybe I'm wrong here, wants anyone to come and have to be a burden on our economy. Can we assume that? We obviously want people to contribute, ideally, but do we want people where we have to actually support? Do we?
Yeah, well, but see, that's a
criminals.
really complex question,
And it might not serve the audience.
it may not serve the audience. 'Cause here's the truth. The reason that we've, as a policy, we've favored family unification is because intact family units are more economically successful than ones that aren't. And that's one of the reasons we push that, and that's kind of hard to realize. I mean, everybody can say, oh, we want the world's best rocket scientists over here. But
And everyone can say we don't want the criminals and the drug dealers.
But do we want farm workers here?
Yeah.
And I think
That'd be,
most
and that,
economists would say yes.
that's where you would see the understanding of the candidate, correct? So when they're doing this, they want to lead them in a direction where they provide clarity, so we know exactly.
Yeah, and I think so as a guiding principle, if you can just try to ask the candidates who should be allowed to immigrate and who shouldn't. I mean, it's a really, that's a soul-searching question.
And that's more than saying they're for a comprehensive or
Right.
piecemeal, or they're against amnesty for everyone, because they just lead into the problem.
Yeah.
Because they brought up the Simpson-Mazzoli Act that was passed in the 90s, which gave amnesty to everyone. And no one wants to, I don't know if anyone wants to do that, or very few people want to.
Well, I think there is, there are a lot of Democrats who would favor a sweeping amnesty right now for most of the 11 million undocumented that are here. And there are a lot of really powerful economic arguments about why you want to do that and bring people out of the shadows and normalize their status. In this environment, it's not a very easy argument to make. But there are a lot, and the whole DACA situation, so out of that 11,800,000 of this subset of DACA, who, that's exactly what they're arguing. It's a broad sweeping amnesty for anybody who's brought here as a child, through no fault of their own. But yeah, I think, and amnesty is a nasty word.
Because everyone thinks that if you give amnesty, and you gave it in the 1990s, now if you give it in 2017, then 15 years from now, we're going to do the same thing all over again, and you're not going to do something. Any other directions you guys want to go with that topic? Guys, this conversation is had for you guys to, one time I said this last time, so you know where to take this argument if you want to. You'll hear the argument, so when you hear it, you know how to develop it a little, have to develop it.
On the question, asking if we should bring more or bring in fewer, based on past statistics, after we get their value and their sense of direction, should we push it further?
Yeah, so I think, you could start with a statement of fact that, in fiscal year 2017, the United States let in X number of legal immigrants. Is that the right amount? Should we be lower or higher? And let them kind of play with that, and then you kind of bore in, and I think just the basic question to ask, and it is really a simple question, is who should we let in and who should we not? And how do you determine that? And let them kind of squirm. And so, one of the subtexts there is obviously Trump's, whole shithole country argument. It's a very emotional, very fraught topic. But I think it really begins, if you can get them to answer the question honestly, and especially since you're kind of catching them off guard a little bit, it really tells you a lot about their value structure, right? This is when you start asking the question about who should be allowed to come to the country, you're really beginning to ask the question about what the country is, and how they view the country.
Are you suggesting that it might be a good way to start this topic? By just giving a factual information?
Yeah.
And then not even asking them the piecemeal versus the, they'll bring it up and then you can take them down that road once they choose that road.
Once you start to ask them, how do you determine who should be able to come in, who should not, then you've just got to ask the whole piecemeal thing versus this is a philosophical debate about who we are as a country.
And then eventually one of them or both of them or all of them will get onto some sort of dreamer program and
yeah, and so then I think you could pivot the DACA at some point too, depending on what the status is. Right
and
now.
how they address it, because they might actually set it up for a conversation for them. I like that idea. And is there any kind of factual ID? You can start out with national defense. Could you start out the same way and see where they go?
Well, I think the factual basis you could start with is, the United States has been at war continuously. Here's one way. How many of this room were born after 2001?
That's so weird.
This is listen to this. You guys are the first generation in American history where the country has been at war your entire lives. That's, so I think that's a way you can personalize it. And so even those of you who were born in 99 or 2000,
You could almost say the same.
Realistically, all the students in this room have never known a moment when the United States has not been at war. And so you can kind of use that as a framework to say, how do you, as a candidate,
Handle the vets or handle.
decide when we go to war? I mean, that is, I was thinking about this the other day. It's a really stunning realization that, the 2020 election, that presidential election, there will be a whole new group of voters who were all born after September 11, 2000. You're going to have millions of voters who become eligible for the first time who have never known a country that was not at war. That, I mean, and like I said, realistically, all of you are in this category because you really don't become conscious of what you're doing until you're 2 or 3 at best. So you guys have never known a country that wasn't.
I mean, that was your idea, but that's a cool way to start out the question.
Yeah,
And you would let them use that?
I would, because part of this too, I think ought to be, part of your mission, in addition to informing the community, is you're trying to empower other students and get them involved. And I think taking that sort of personal privilege with a question, I think is a really powerful way to get to it. And I know, so with people like Veronica and Dory, for sure, their kids are in the same generation as you, so they've raised kids in this kind of environment too, and maybe they can personalize it that way too, I don't know. But it really is a stunning thing that, this has never happened in our nation's history until now. We've been at war for almost 17 years, and there's no end in sight. And not as hot as it was a few years ago.
That's deep. It's almost like telling the students that are being taught at the high schools now, all their teachers that are new have been trained from their high school days all the way through under standard, high pressure standardized tests. So they don't know any environment where there was not a high pressure standardized test. It's off topic, but yeah, but I like the idea that these kids have never, God, I wish I was still in the classroom, that's cool. There's not been, God, every kid that's around has been at a time where we've had at an actual war or a conflict, if you want to call it, depending on how you define war. Yeah. All right. Any other immigration?
I have one more.
Immigration.
Border security, I guess. It was kind of mentioned about asking about like appropriations for like border patrol and border security in general. Is there any question you think we should?
Yeah, so there's some ways you can approach that, and it'd be interesting to see how they want to handle it. So President Trump has said he wants to hire 5,000 more Border Patrol agents, I think another 10,000 immigration enforcement agents. And I think it's fair to ask them, do you support that, and then how would you use them? Here's a stat I love to throw at people. The average Border Patrol agent in El Paso, in the El Paso sector, which obviously covers New Mexico too, the average Border Patrol agent made one undocumented immigrant apprehension per month last year. That's not new too, by the way. It's been that way for a number of years. And so I asked, when I had an opportunity to interview Senator Cruz a few months ago, and I asked him this because he was saying, you know, he had just come back from talking to Border Patrol agents, and he said, you know, we need more boots on the ground. So I threw out that stat to him and said, what are 5,000 more agents going to do these guys aren't doing right now? And they're only making one apprehension a month. And he basically said he didn't believe my statistics. And then I sent him the statistics because they come from Homeland Security. Then I never heard from him again. But I think this gets to something that a lot of El Pasoans aren't comfortable talking about too. So, you know, we're very proud that we live in this community that's the safest city and size in the country. We'll talk a lot about that. I think one of the reasons for that is because we have a large federal law enforcement presence here, Border Patrol or whatever, and a lot of people don't like to talk about that. You know, I moved to El Paso in 1986, and we did have a crime problem. Very significant, especially property crime. A lot of thefts were running rampant. And then it was when the Border Patrol changed some of its strategies, and they kind of kept the thieves from coming, because they're stealing cars and taking them to Mexico where they can sell them. But the Border Patrol changed its strategy really helped impact that crime rate. So nobody really likes to talk about, especially on the Democratic side, you know, borders enforcement. But obviously any international border needs to be secured and defended, so you can kind of talk to the candidates about, you know, is the Border Patrol in El Paso, in the El Paso area, doing a good job right now? Do we need more agents, fewer agents? What should their role be? The other issue that comes up a lot, and you haven't heard it discussed as much, is this idea of the militarization of the border. The Border Patrol is a part of that. I think when you talk to Border Patrol agents, you know, they're really cops. I mean, they're law enforcement officers. They don't see themselves that way. They see themselves as soldiers on the front line of the war. And it's a different mindset entirely. Because if you're a soldier and you're on the front lines, what does that make the person on the other side? It makes them the enemy. And law enforcement doesn't work with it. So I think have the candidates talking about what they see as the role of the Border Patrol. Do we need more agents here? Do we need fewer? And it's a good question because those Border Patrol agents are also voters. And you don't want to be telling your constituents that their jobs are important. It'd be interesting to see how they answer that. Because otherwise you get into this kind of empty talk about how we need to rely more on technology and things like that. And, you know, Will Hurd talks a lot about that. He has a lot of good points about it, but it becomes a very easy dodge from answering tougher questions. It's like, well, you can have all of the sensors and all of the drones and all of that you want, but eventually to interdict drug smugglers or whatever, you need guys on the ground. And so how do you approach that as a country? And again, the Republican part of the conversation could actually get very interesting too.
Do you think it would be smart to, like, from there lead into questions on, like, that, like, policies that would, like, be extremely outdated in terms of, like, border control and, like, security of the border? Because, I mean, I feel like a lot of the policies that are currently in place aren't, like, equal to what's contemporarily, like, happening.
So here's another statistic that I'll throw out at you because I think it's exactly right. Over the last 3 years, half of all of the apprehensions that the Border Patrol has made have been in what they call the Rio Grande Valley sector, which is over by McAllen. But the Border Patrol has only assigned 18% of its force to where it's making half of its apprehensions. There are more Border Patrol agents in the Tucson sector, which is most of Arizona, than there are in the Rio Grande Valley, 500 more to be precise, even though there are only a quarter of the apprehensions. So there's deployment issues. The truth about the Border Patrol is it's a horribly managed agency, and this is not a partisan issue. This goes back to when Democrats were overseeing Homeland Security. It's a badly run agency. It's prone to corruption and violence because it's so badly managed. But truth be told, I think, again, this is, I get back to this whole 10-minute thing. You've got border security lumped in with these immigration questions. So again, which of these are going to be more important for your audience? Because I think, so if you, like, say you're going to reduce it to 3 big topic areas instead of 4, you're really talking about, 3 minutes and 20 seconds per topic. Right. But these are all great questions. I think what you guys have to sort of decide amongst yourselves are what are the most important parts for you, but also what do you think the audience wants to know most?
Okay.
I can talk about immigration strategy and policy all day long.
The next was like economy.
Yeah, economy and with the focus on NAFTA.
And so the topics we have under that are, of course, NAFTA and then also the tax bill. So either of those.
Like questions that maybe, or just general subtopics that we can, like, turn into questions from there.
Just the short answer they give on NAFTA is going to be revealing because it's in both the Democratic and Republican parties. You have a real split. The leadership of both parties historically have been pro-free trade, but increasingly the bases of the two parties are more protectionist than the leadership, and they're very wary of international trade agreements because they think the United States has got the short end of the stick and export of jobs. So I think kind of a general question on the role of free trade agreements would be a good one. And if they say they favor them, then you can have a follow-up question to ask. What do you say to a factory worker in Ohio who thinks he's lost his job because of these free trade agreements? That kind of thing. If they're opposed to free trade agreements, I'm not sure they will be. You can ask them, well, El Paso is a community whose entire economy is wrapped up around trade. How do we protect that in the absence of free trade agreements?
Because the Republicans are not ever even going to come out as isolationists, or no one's going to.
Some might be. Trump is. I mean, Trump is absolutely. So the key question, and again, I don't know either of the Republican candidates, I don't know where they're going to come down on this. But there is, especially in the Tea Party version of the Republicans, there is a real pushback on trade agreements. They hate them. They think that it's that these trade agreements, the United States always comes out on the short end of the stick. Data doesn't support that, but it's kind of hard to argue. because you can personalize this issue so easily by showing an unemployed factory worker. It's kind of harder to personalize it by showing somebody who has a trucking job in El Paso because we've expanded free trade.
So then I guess it just becomes a question of like, what do you wear, like way more important, like the ideal, or not the ideals, but the interests of like Americans elsewhere, other than like along the border or in places where NAFTA is important to the states.
Yeah, I think you could. That's kind of the classic question about representative democracy. At its heart, do you represent the interests of your district when they conflict with the interests of the nation? But so I think the other issue you can ask about NAFTA, because obviously it's open to renegotiation now, is you can ask each of the candidates what changes should be made in NAFTA, what specific changes should be made. Of course, NAFTA was passed at a time before the internet was really a big deal. So much of it, and even the way the energy sector of the economy works has changed a lot since NAFTA. So there are a lot of economists who are pro-free trade would argue that there are changes that need to be made. But just you can ask the candidates questions on what they would favor. Be interested to see how up to speed they are. Labor protections might be of big interest for Democrats too. Whether it's labor protections in Mexico or the United States, but obviously one of the biggest supporters for the Democratic Party financially are labor unions. That becomes an issue.
And then I think Dave yesterday mentioned something that I heard recently, and it was interesting because he said that like different parts that you make, like if you make a part, some parts, like for like cars, I'm confused. So for some like automobile industry, some parts are made in other countries like Canada or Mexico, and then shipped back to the United States, and the parts are here, and then back and forth, and then at that point, there's like a question of like who was the manufacturer.
What's the country of origin?
So I don't know if that would be, because I would wonder if that could be kind of synthesized into some sort of.
So that's part of the renegotiation too. Is how you classify country of origin. This issue has gone away, but earlier there were a lot of Republicans were favoring this border adjustment tax, where basically you slap a 20% duty on a part that's brought into the country. And Richard does it better than I do, but in the manufacturing cycle, the same component might cross the border 3 or 4 times.
And that's what he was talking
And
about.
so, and then how do you tax it each time it crosses? So it's the manufacturing cycle is much more complex than most people understand. But I think the Republicans have largely abandoned that idea anyhow. But I think kind of country of origin is a big part of the renegotiation, and what classifies as a domestic part. It's a complex issue, right? And Richard would have a better idea how to ask a question about that.
And that's showing the argument also that the free trade agreement cannot be dissolved, basically, isn't it? Or you're going to run into problems where the tax is the origin, correct?
Yeah, so the manufacturing cycle that's developed under NAFTA would just get blown apart if you don't have some kind of free trade agreement, because then you have to, each country passes its own tariffs and things like that, and it would certainly destroy good chunks of the Mexican economy, but I think it would probably wipe out the vast majority of our local economy here in El Paso too.
And then the other subtopic we had under the economy was the tax bill, and we were wondering, I guess, if there were any valuable questions to be asked
So
there.
I would urge you probably to move away from the tax bill right now, because it's already, because you could ask them, would you favor repealing the tax bill, and all the Democrats are going to say yes. I think, especially with Democrats, probably a more relevant conversation around the economy would deal with stagnant wage growth and income inequality. I think those are much bigger issues for Democratic primary voters, and there's a lot of policy implications for how you go about addressing that. And the tax bill plays a role in that too, because I think a lot of people would argue that that tax bill is going to exacerbate income inequality rather than address it. But I think the unemployment rate is down around 4.1% now, but wage growth has never really recovered from the 2008 recession. And again, if you want to personalize this, you are part of perhaps the first generation in American history that questions whether you're going to do better economically than your parents did. I mean, there's a real question around that. It's because of income inequality and stagnant wage growth.
But they asked that question when I was in high school. Am I going to be as well off as my parents?
Yeah, but the data out there really supports right now that you guys are screwed. I mean, there's a lot of really bad trends out there right now, and a lot of it has to do with automation and everything, and the kind of jobs that are available. But I think I'm just suggesting if you want to look for another way to personalize that, there's a good question about whether this generation is going to do better than their parents did, which, I mean, that is the identification of the American dream. That's what the American dream is all about. And so then you can start talking about income inequality, wage stagnation, things like that, and what the candidates might do to address them.
And that might be another cool way, once again, to personalize the question and then go off on whatever, NAFTA, whatever else you want to go off on. But I heard that same question. Remember, when I graduated from high school, I think interest rate for housing was like 17, 18%. I mean, it was just super rude. So my parents never thought I'd ever own a home. Is that enough on the economy? Should we go to?
I think again, because of time limits, I think if you just sort of address the basic questions on aspirations for people, their lives being better, I think that is sort of overriding, whether it's for Democrats or Republicans, just this sense of unease that the economy doesn't work for me anymore. As a matter of fact, it works against me, and it works for the benefit of others, and then how we might define others. So I think that sense of unease of what can be done.
And then the fourth topic we have, the fourth topic we made just entirely in case someone didn't get to 10 minutes or we needed to fill some time in, and that was healthcare.
So I will tell you that if you did a survey of Democratic primary voters of what the most important issue in this election is, and I'll put an asterisk next to this because it's really a bigger underlying issue, but healthcare goes right to the top. When you talk to the candidates about what they hear most importantly out there from constituents, healthcare is a huge, huge issue. On the Democratic side, this sort of single-payer system or Medicare for all has almost become a litmus test for a lot of Democrats as far as who's going to get their support. The Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress are pretty unsuccessful in trying to dismantle Obamacare, but they nipped at pieces of it, including the individual mandate now. So I think healthcare concerns are really huge out there, and that's tied up with broader economic anxiety issues too. But I would strongly urge you to focus on healthcare, especially for the Democrats. You might be able to flip some of these priorities with the Republicans, but I think healthcare is one of the dominant issues for Democratic primary voters right now.
And within the Democratic candidates that we have for the 16th district, are we going to get different stands?
I think you will. I think Veronica Escobar and probably Ron Chavez will be in in favor of Medicare for all. I don't think Dory Fennenbach would. She'd be a little bit more cautious and conservative about that. But I think, and so once somebody says they am for Medicare for all, then you can start digging into, how do you assure quality of care under all of that, and how do you avoid rationing health care? There's some really good questions in this too.
Because every country that's gone to a single payer has problems with who gets the quality.
Yeah, and the truth is, no matter what your healthcare system, there's rationing that will go on. It's just a question of how you wind up doing the rationing. Here we developed this system where we ration it by your ability to pay, so if you can't pay, you don't get it.
I think you need to go into a little depth, maybe I'm wrong here. The notion of rationing, I think it's a cool concept. What do you mean by rationing for kids?
It's access to healthcare, who gets healthcare and under what conditions. So I think, one of the mistakes that the Democrats made in pushing Obamacare is they equated access to insurance. And insurance is a part of access, because if you can't pay for health insurance, you probably can't get access. But it's not the entirety of it. And so, there are, even within our own community, there are neighborhoods where people may have insurance, but they really don't have much access to healthcare because there aren't hospitals or clinics or whatever. And then you get out into rural areas of Texas, one of the big crises that rural areas are facing right now, that was addressing, is the closure of hospitals and something like that. So we have this very inefficient healthcare delivery system.
Does everyone understand what he's saying here, guys? Because if you're questioning, this is crucial, because I think all candidates are going to turn it into an insurance issue. It's not access. They're going to talk about insurance, affordability of insurance. Can I afford insurance? You talk to your teachers over at Coronado High School, they're going to say they have a lousy health insurance. They are, without a doubt. They're going to complain. When people consider retiring, they won't retire because they can't afford that health insurance. That health insurance is going to take a big chunk of their retirement. All right, so
Until you're Medicare eligible.
yeah, until you're Medicare eligible. All right, so you have to get them past the idea. I think you have to walk them past. If we go with this topic, because I know what your next question is after we go through all these topics, what order should we put these topics in? All right. The way that it's being explained to you tonight is different from the way it was being explained to you last night. All right? And I think this idea of maybe if you go with this topic, you might not want to equate it with just insurance. Who has access to it?
And Richard, who represented part of the medical community when he was in the chamber, can talk at some length about doctors' concerns on this too. And that's part of access, because if you don't have people who want to practice medicine, you're not going to get access. And so doctors are really concerned about reimbursement rates and all of that. And I think when the healthcare system is 1/8 of our economy and growing, so there are all kinds of issues wrapped up in healthcare.
And this might be the only issue that you could probably talk about at not only the 16th district, but you could also talk about at the county judge meeting.
Yeah, and so one of the things that Rob Escobar will say, for example, is she'll brag about what the county did in building all these clinics around town to increase access. A lot of private sector docs would take exception to that. But there are, because our healthcare delivery system is so fragmented, every different level of government has some role in healthcare.
So if someone's going to say they're going to have, if one of the candidates come out and say we just need a total single payer, then you have to ask them the question, what does that exactly mean?
Right.
And what does that mean to the access? This is how I see this argument developing up. You want, because they're going to come out and say it because it sounds good. Okay, what does that mean?
And I think one of the questions you could ask as a follow-up to that is, a lot of physicians have expressed concern around single payer that they may not be able to sustain their practice. So how do we make sure that if we go to a single payer system, that we have the healthcare providers out there that we need, and we have them where we need them too? It's really complex questions. guessing most of the candidates are not following that. They'll just give you the single payer answer. And then the Republicans who know, I mean, they're not gonna, they're probably gonna be talking about, selling insurance across state lines and things like that. That can nip around the edges, but don't risk it.
Any other questions on the healthcare one?
Do you think that, entitlement, like just in general, like citizens' entitlement to healthcare and social services should be, like something?
I mean, you could ask, the kind of good philosophical question is, is healthcare a right? Great debate around that too. And so that defines how you begin to approach these issues, because if you think that healthcare is a right, which a lot of Democrats do, then you shape policies one way. If you don't believe it's a right, which most Republicans don't, then you can shape policies differently.
I'm going to test your skills right now. You gave them a kind of a practical approach to start all these topics with. How would you put it so it gives that same kind of approach? Sort of, they're the first generation that has not seen a war. They're the first generation that are truly going to fall into this category. They're not going to be as successful as their parents. What do you do for healthcare?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Now I'm testing your creativity here.
Yeah, because healthcare is more important to you and me than it is to these guys.
Because these guys don't need
You're
it.
healthy and, you don't.
Except for the occasional
Yeah.
catastrophic youth. These people are pretty healthy. They get a sniffle or cold every once in a while, but they don't get anything serious.
Yeah, and so I don't know that you need to personalize every issue.
But it'd be a neat way to do it.
But you could, and so, you could.
Do they come out and say, hey, I don't need it? Why?
Well, so that's part of the Obamacare debate
That's
too,
right.
right? So if you're 25 years old and you're healthy, why should you be forced to buy health insurance? And the only reason is because if we don't force you to buy it,
The cost.
it costs you and me a lot more, and it makes it
Thanks, guys.
affordable.
Go buy health insurance.
But so I wouldn't know how to personalize that, although.
The other three are cool how you did it.
Yeah.
This one, I don't know, unless you just come out and say, hey, man, I don't need it.
Yeah, what kind of, you can also ask, what kind of health insurance am I going to have or healthcare coverage am I going to have? The U.S. has always been proud to have, some of the best healthcare in the world, which we do and we don't. I mean, most of the advancements in healthcare have been done here. The truth is, a lot of the people in this country don't have access to those advancements for the right reasons. So, yeah, I can't think, if I think of one, I'll let you know, but this may be one where you don't want to worry about personal. So I want to throw out one other thought, and I told Mr. Bergman this the other day when we were meeting. There's an elephant in the room, especially with the Democrats, that this election is all about, and we're not talking about. That's Trump. Across the country, in the elections last year, you saw this huge growth in Democratic turnout because the electorate is so angry at Trump for a variety of reasons. And you haven't seen the same sort of excitement with the Republicans. But so how do you, or should you, ask about the tone that the president sets and what that means for the country? Because I will tell you that what a lot of Democrats are looking for is somebody who's willing to punch Donald Trump in the mouth. And that's not unusual. That's exactly what the Republicans were looking for in 2010 and 2014. And I think it's why you saw the rise of Trump. A lot of Republican voters wanted somebody who would be willing to punch Barack Obama in the mouth. And so we've become sort of polarized. And, so that polarization is another issue that overhangs everything here. And I know you guys are issues focused and everything, and so, you know, once you start going into the personality realm, kind of like gets you off the mission. But, you know, this election in 2018 is about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, it's really about one thing, and that's President Trump.
So they're going to ask two questions for sure, or one question for sure after the Socratic. After that 10 minutes up, they're going to ask basically a yes/no question with minimal explanation, where they're not going to Socratic them further on it. The one for sure is probably, are you going to agree to a term limit? The other one might be whether or not they're going to accept PAC money. Should the third one be, are you going to punch Trump in the mouth?
I think some version of that. I would want to make it the first question. You know, PAC, Bento's made a big deal about not accepting PAC money and everything, but the reality, I mean, polls tend to show this, and certainly voter activity shows it. The average voter really doesn't care at the end of the day. But I think, I don't know how you ask the question, like, how much do you hate Donald Trump? You know, but I think, you know, one of the questions for the Democrats could be, you know, Trump is unique in that he dominates every conversation. You know, you could ask, you know, how would you, as an elected official, begin to change that discourse or something like that? You can ask him about that. But I just think, you know, this is a unique election in American history, more so than even 2010, which was really a lot about Obama. But this election, you know, it's not just Veronica Escobar versus Dory Fettenbach or versus whoever the Republican nominee is. It's all about Trump and the sort of the altered political and social culture that's out there. But the shithole comment is the sort of the latest example, and I guarantee by the time your forum rolls around, everybody's going to have forgotten about shithole countries because you have said four things even more offensive between now and then. So, and again, I don't know how you get at that, but I think not addressing Trump is sort of ignoring the very unique nature of this election.
For the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yeah, Republicans and the Democrats too. You know, and so I keep talking about Will Hurd, and I only mention him because I know him really well. You know, Will is one of the few Republicans that has sort of walked that tightrope with Trump, criticizing more appropriate, but not wanting to totally alienate his base. It would be very interesting to see how Republican candidates in El Paso, you know, Trump lost El Paso County by a greater percentage margin than any Republican nominee in history. He was unpopular before he was elected. He's even more unpopular now. So how, as a Republican in that environment, do you run? You know, how do you? And one of the things you could ask the Republican candidates would be very interesting is, would you like Donald Trump to come to El Paso and campaign for you? You know,
Oh, that's a good way to ask
it's a very interesting.
Can you
question.
just be really blunt with them and say, are you willing to punch Donald Trump in the mouth? Bob Moore told us.
My question is, do you think that if we have that question towards the end, I know it would be the first of those unique questions, but do you think they'll be able to address that in 1 minute? I feel like
Sure.
that might lead to ranting or.
I think 1 minute is a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, they should be able to
Say yes or no.
Yeah, or just, you know,
Of course I want to punch him.
how much do you hate Donald Trump? You know, that's kind of the. But I do think, and you could probably phrase it in a way that really gets back to your mission too, because, you know, your mission is to promote civil discourse and everything, and maybe you can frame it that way. You know, how does the United States, you know, how does our society come back from this really coarsening of the public dialogue that we've seen with Trump.
Thanks for coming, man.
Thank you. Dave said something to the effect of, as far as racism, in general, like, he gave a few phrases, but, like, how, for the Democrats, I think was the only way this would work, but, how would you handle policies proposed by the president that perhaps run counter to the values of the community, or how would you handle, or this one says, President has a strong belief that many officials have aligned themselves with these beliefs. How would you handle these issues in coming from a community that is diametrically opposed to these beliefs?
I think it's a good question.
I think it was because of, I think it had something to do with veterans, right? Because he was talking about how, like, nationally, we're trying to, like, nationally, most Democrats aren't going to support, like, well, I mean, they're going to support veterans, but they're not going to support, like, war, like, military growth. And then, like, but El Paso is, like, has such a rich, like, military, like, fortress and such.
Because our Congress.
It creates, like, a contrary. So I think we can create a question out of that.
But I do. I like the way Richard phrased that question too, because it gets at, you know, I think probably the one thing you don't want to do in responding to Trump is to do what he does, because he's like the best at that. So, you know, if you crawl into the gutter with him, you're not going to win out. But I think the way Richard phrased that is a really good question. You know, when the president, sometimes using flamboyant language, makes policy pronouncements that are contrary to the values of our region, how do you respond? I think that's a very good to get at. Because then you're acknowledging sort of the Trump's importance in this election, but you're not personalizing.
And that is as good a question as you suggested for the Republican side. Would you have him come down and campaign
Yeah.
for you? Or would you welcome him campaigning? Because that gets at that whole Trump attitude.
Yeah, and I think you can, and the way you can get into that too is you can mention the step that I did, that President Trump lost El Paso by a bigger margin than any Republican nominee in history. Would you welcome him campaigning for you in the general election? Now, of course, he's not going to come here because it's not a competitive seat, but it's a good question to put on the spot.
To get the attitude towards Trump.
Yeah,
Because that's what you're trying to get.
yeah.
Which is, yeah. And the reason why I came up last night with Dave here is because I said, you're gonna come here tonight and say, talk about the Trump factor, so that's a good conversation.
No, I think Richard has a very good idea of getting at that issue. I like that.
Anything else, guys? Because you got two things you gotta deal with before he leaves, if he has more time.
The last question that we didn't ask yet was what, or how do you think we should prioritize these topics?
Healthcare, the economy. The other two are national defense and immigration.
They'll tell you how Dave.
I'd probably put immigration third and then national defense fourth. I'm guessing Richard, because of his ties to Fort Bliss, would have that one higher than I would.
What was Dave?
You said immigration, economy, Fort Bliss, healthcare.
So I point out Richard's a Republican. And I'm unaffiliated, but I say that only because I think Richard doesn't quite understand the emotional value of healthcare in the Democratic discussion, especially around the single payer issue.
Can they switch the order in the Republican debate?
I think so, absolutely.
Is that fair?
Yeah, because I would suggest that national security is probably a more important issue for Republican voters than
Yeah.
healthcare.
Right.
And we're going for the audience.
Yeah.
What's the other question you have for him?
That was,
What did
In
go?
terms of like whether we should have it on the same.
No, we already got that one. The last thing we asked Dave last night, because we didn't have it planned, and now on January 30th now, 2 weeks, we have a county judge debate. And we haven't sat down as a group and talked about what topics we should include there. What do you think the topics are for the county judge today?
Healthcare, and so the subset of that is University Medical Center and Children's Hospital.
You brought that up.
And sort of the budget implications. Because one of the Children's Hospital is on the verge of collapse again because the economics aren't working out. But the community has a ton of money invested in that. So I think the healthcare issue, because the county does run the public hospital here, is a big one. I think taxes is always the bigger issue. But again, people always say I favor low taxes. And I think you could get into, what services should the county be rendering. The county's constitutional mandate is very small. They're in charge with running the jail and a couple of other very specific functions, and that's it.
And the sheriff's department.
Yeah, and the sheriff is attached.
And even though the sheriff, and this is what we discussed last night, because the kids have to understand this who are going to do this, there's a strange deal between the county and the city, because in the city limits, the city usually takes care of all the policing and everything else, even though the county technically has jurisdiction within the city, but they're usually just outside the cities in Canutillo, Anthony, Fayetteville, San Alley, all those. So the big issue is healthcare, because they deal with healthcare across the board.
Yeah.
The city doesn't really deal with healthcare.
But the biggest, costliest function of county government is criminal justice, because they oversee both the courts and the jail.
Right.
So there's Vince Perez in particular has led a really strong effort to reform a lot of that and lower the costs, whether it's dealing with bail, whether it's dealing with Cooley Jail. That we have the controversy, again, immigration comes into this. El Paso County has a contract with the federal government to house federal inmates. El Paso County houses more federal inmates than any other county in Texas because of that contract. And when you're talking about federal inmates on the border, you're talking about immigration cases. Almost all the people that the county is holding are people who've been arrested for immigration violations.
So what would the because there's no Republicans running for the position, only Democrats running for the position. So whoever wins this wins the general election. Same with the 16th district. But what discretionary authority does the county judge have that, depending on who's the county judge?
So the county judge is.
Can they say no to the federal government? Say we're
Well, not by themselves. The county judge is really one of 5 votes on commissioners court.
Yeah.
The county judge presides over the meetings and has, I think, a certain moral voice because she's the only member of the court who is elected across the county instead of in districts. So you've got 5 people who make these decisions. And
Which is called Commissioner's Court.
Right. So there are a lot of really important decisions around criminal justice that they've really been wrestling with. Because the truth is, over the years, we've just allowed this to mushroom and mushroom, and nobody was really paying attention. And now the criminal justice system is threatening to swallow everything out there because it's so expensive. And so Vince has been one of the leaders in sort of trying to reform that, but a lot of his ideas have been really controversial. Including he proposed ending the contract with the federal government because he believes that $80 a day or whatever the feds are paying doesn't cover the county's cost. So he thinks the county is subsidizing these federal inmates. The sheriff has a different point of view on that. And the math is kind of all over the place. I don't know what the truth is. But I think sort of controlling criminal justice costs is a good point of conversation for the county judge. What steps do you favor to control the growing costs in
So
justice
the,
system.
so the people might be narrowed down to two topics for them, correct? The healthcare and the criminal justice system?
And I think taxes more broadly, and that's where you get into sort of the mandated functions of county government. You know, are there things that the county is doing today that they shouldn't be doing? And one of the issues that always comes up with that is the Scottsdale Park. That I think the county also has one park in the Upper Valley, one park in the Lower Valley too. But all the other parks in the area are run by municipalities, so should county government get in the parks business? It's a small part of the budget, but that's an example of a non-mandated service that the county's taking on. But so I think taxes is, because I think that between the UMC tax rate and the county tax rate, that's the second highest part of your tax bill after the school district. It's a pretty big deal.
So we have three topics there. And then we can have, because I know George Chidiac, when they did, you seen the first one that we did with the Socratic method, and Billy came in and they did a lot of research on that. I think they did very good. But at a debriefing in my quarterly, he said, you didn't go after them hard enough.
Yeah, I think that's part of the issue is that I think it's hard for students to really get into a lot of these really esoteric issues in local government. You've got a good understanding of a lot of the national issues and things like that. But when you're talking about city and county government, it's just so small.
Whoever has that, I think we'll have to sit down with Chidiac and maybe even Billy, if we can get a hold of Billy and see if they can be able to.
And I'm willing to sit down with folks too.
All right, Billy, you come again before the 30th? Wow.
Happy to.
Excellent. We might invite him.
Hey, I'm unemployed right now, so it's we've got lots of things.
Tell me about it.
Maybe I can open up a car wash or something.
Hey, there we go. Car wash, that'd be good. Think people care about their cars enough?
Around here, that's everything.
Wow.
So I think you guys have really great questions lined up here. I think you've identified sort of the key topics. The real challenge then is to narrow each of the 3 or 4 topic areas you do enough where you can really, will have time to probe them. And you know, the 3 minutes and 20 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but it can be.
But it's better than a 30-second stump question.
Yeah. So the key thing you can do for voters that's not being done at these other forums is really kind of probe them on some of these issues
And see how they think.
and get them off of their canned answers.
Good to you.
It's good to make them feel uncomfortable without, you don't have to be rude or anything like that, but it's good to see people uncomfortable. And Alberto always talks about his first experience with one of these forums, and he got nailed because it wasn't read. He learned a lot from it, so that's a good thing.
And I think he wants to have a senatorial forum here with Ted Cruz when.
Sure, he would love it.
What are the chances? Because the seniors won't be a part of that, but
You know,
is it possible?
it is possible, and I think
30% chance?
it could be, and I think, you know, so a lot of it will depend on what the polls show, and if Cruz is way ahead in the polls,
He won't do it.
he won't.
If it's close.
If it's close, he might actually do something in El Paso, because he'll want to show that, you know, he's bold enough to go into his opponent's backyard.
And will he allow for Socratic? My understanding, when Cruz does anything, he always says, okay, these are the questions you're going to get asked.
Well, so, you know,
We can do it with the local candidates. but-
Yeah, I think, you know, I did a gubernatorial debate in '98 and a lieutenant governor debate, and the campaigns have a lot of say in what and they don't want to be put in a position where they could be embarrassed. And so now
It'll be pretty regular.
that'd be a more traditional form. But I think you might be excited by the idea of having students conduct the forum, so I think it's a possibility. The one challenge is I don't know that anybody in El Paso is particularly close to Cruz, even a lot of Republican leadership, but maybe.
Anything else, guys?
No, that's all.
Wraps it up.
thinking.
You know, the other thing to think of too, and I don't know if the Texas Tribune's going to be able to organize everything, we put a bug in Evans here that if they are able to organize a gubernatorial or Senate forum to maybe allow this organization to submit a couple questions or something.
It's coming to town on the 7th, if we have a delegation
That's
there.
right,
we
he's
can-
doing that, he's doing the DeMarco thing, right? But I think Evan might be interested in that, because they kind of to be able to say, here's questions from students who have more at stake than anybody else has. Yeah, these are the results of this person.
So guys, go online and sign up for that meeting, we're not having a debate that day, because we're gonna have to move that Republican debate. 16th, because we can't have the Republican before the Democrat.
To the Thursday or the?
Probably, what day, we can discuss that, we don't have to have
And that's the 15th.
Mr. Moore here while we do that.
Do you guys have a location yet? Are you able to do it at the auditorium?
We can do it at the auditorium, I think, yeah. But we're looking for something more central. So we have 2 debates going on right now. It's convenient because we know the school, but if we want to expand outwards, it'd be nice to take our show on the road. And we did it at El Paso High, but their acoustics is horrible, horrible. We thought about doing it at Bowie, but that might, I don't know.
Yeah, and the truth is, there are very few facilities that are like really easily accessible. I think the Trans Mountain campus has a pretty good auditorium, community college, but that's, it's kind of off the beaten path and we're just a little bit. I think the Verde campus may have a good auditorium.
Or they could do it where Evan Smith and the Texas Tribune told them to deal, that big room in the,
At Newtown?
at the administrative
Oh,
building
yeah.
at EPCC, that's a pretty good size room.
Yeah, although one of the challenges I've heard is they're about to close Hawkins for construction work, which could get kind
But
of.
that's a challenge anywhere in this town.
Yeah, but I like the idea of trying to get someplace more central.
And we have connections over at EPCC, and they might do it if there's nothing going on that night.
Yeah, reach out to the administration up there and see what they can do. 'Cause, I mean, the nice thing about Coronado is they don't charge you anything, I'm assuming, right?
If we have another teacher over there that's willing to sign the paperwork, they won't charge me. I don't think they want me signing the paperwork.
Yeah. But I think it's still good for the school's image to have those events there too, so.
Incredibly good. They get a lot of mileage out of it.
So good, I'm at your disposal if you guys need anything, let me know.
How many days notice do we have to give you for if we want you to come and talk about the county judge more?
Couple days are probably good. I should be free, but,
We'll give you a heads, and we can come in your convenience.
yeah. So, good, all right, good luck with this, look forward to working with you guys.
Appreciate your time.
Great to see you. Tell you guys, say hi.